That the existing social protection system be strengthened and scaled up to provide support to affected people. This is not a path without challenge. The investments needed for climate action are substantial, but not out of reach. Many climate actions are win-win solutions, contributing to mitigating climate change while making the Philippines more resilient.
Magandang umaga, Pilipinas! Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you are joining around the world. What you just saw right now is a strong call for climate action in the Philippines. Together with the World Bank, welcome to today's webinar where we will be discussing climate and development in the country. Particularly from the Philippines Country Climate and Development report, which was officially launched last year during COP27, we will talk about increasing climate resilience in agriculture this morning. So we are streaming to you live through the SEARCA online learning and virtual engagement or SOLVE platform via Zoom and Facebook Live. My name is Jean Labios and I am a program specialist of the Training for Development Unit under the Education and Collective Learning Department of SEARCA. I will be your host and moderator this morning. The short video shown earlier has given you a glimpse about SEARCA and what we do. SEARCA is hosted by the Philippine government in the campus of the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. So we are coming to you live from Los Baños, Laguna, the special science and nature city of the Philippines. You also have seen our partner for today's call, the World Bank, and its 75 years of partnership with the Philippines for inclusive growth. This SOLVE webinar series is SEARCA's immediate response to the emerging impacts of the COVID-19 global pandemic on food security by maximizing the use of information and communication technology platforms to inform, educate, and share evidence-based solutions and tested technologies, as well as best practices on the ground. If you are new to this webinar, this is actually the 45th webinar since it was launched on April 28, 2020, at the height of the pandemic. So the Philippines Country Climate and Development Report, or CCDR, have shown how climate risks are already affecting agriculture and food security. This morning, we want to highlight how agriculture remains critically important for food security, employment, and poverty reduction. Agriculture contributes about 10% of GDP and employs around 26% of the economically active population. It accounts for about a quarter of national emissions, primarily from methane and nitrous oxide emissions from rice production and livestock. But unlike in other sectors, emissions are not growing. SEARCA's 11th five-year plan, which was launched in July 2020, identifies enhanced agriculture and rural development towards climate resilience as one of the priority areas that would accelerate transformation through agricultural innovation. So we are happy to have World Bank this morning for this webinar. So before we proceed to our online conversation, please allow me to quickly go over some statistics gathered from the 44th SOLVE webinar held last 19 October 2022, which was on agri-food tourism. The infograph shows that 64% of our online viewers were female, and the rest were male. It also indicates that almost 30 individuals tuned in via Zoom, and more than 70 individuals viewed the webinar through SEARCA's Facebook page. Lastly, we're happy to note that we have had online attendees not only from the Philippines, but also from Cambodia, Indonesia, Malaysia, US, and Vietnam. So let me now go over the program flow, which is currently shown on your screen. After my opening and a few housekeeping rules, we will have some welcome messages. First, from Dr. Maria Cristeta N. Quaresma, Senior Program Head of the Education and Collective Learning Department of SEARCA. And then we will hear from Dr. Dina O'Malley Deininger, Practice Manager for Agriculture and Food Global Practice of East Asia and the Pacific of the World Bank. Then we proceed with our speaker this morning, Ms. Anuja Kar, Senior Agriculture Economist for Agriculture and Food Global Practice at the World Bank. She will be presenting the Philippines Country Climate and Development Report by highlighting the section on the importance of climate-smart agriculture. I know you're excited to hear our speaker's presentation, but allow me to go over some instructions on how you can send us your questions about the Philippine CCDR and Anuja's presentation. So how do you do this? For those of you who are tuned in via SEARCA's Facebook page, you may type your questions in the comments section. Kindly indicate your location now and or country of origin. If you are tuned in via Zoom, please post your questions or comments in the Q&A box, which you would find in the menu bar on your screen. So kindly indicate your location and or country of origin as well. Our SOLVE team will collate, curate, and compile those questions for me, and I will convey these to our speaker. Hopefully, we will have enough to cover enough time to cover as many questions as we can. So please be clear when you are posting your question. We will also do our best to get as many questions as we can during the open forum. And a reminder, kindly refrain from posting your email address in the comments section. You can provide this information to us upon responding to our evaluation form and e-certificate requests. And the link for that will be posted at the end of the webinar. Please note that this webinar will be recorded and will be made available on SEARCA's Facebook page and YouTube channel. Today's presentation will also be uploaded on SEARCA's website at www.searca.org. The slides shown in the past webinars are already uploaded there, and a QR code later will be shown to download the full report or the copy of the Philippine CCDR towards when we do our closing. For your social media posts, especially on insights or takeaways from this webinar, please use the hashtag SEARCASolve. If you have issues or experiencing technical difficulties with the Zoom online platform, please contact us at solve@searca.org. So moving on to today's presentation, I'd like to introduce our speaker first. Our speaker is Ms. Anuja Kar. She joined the Food and Agriculture Global Practice of the World Bank as an economist in June 2015. She is currently engaged with the Global Agriculture and Food Security Program as an economist and monitoring and evaluation specialist. Prior to joining the Agriculture Global Practice, Anuja spent 2 years building econometric models using household and farm level surveys for India, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh within the World Bank. Her key areas of focus are food security, agriculture productivity, labor markets, and foreign direct investment. Before joining the development sector, she worked in a private institution for 2 years, where her primary responsibilities included covering Philippine macroeconomics and developing macroeconomic models and tools for emerging markets. She has an MA in public policy with distinction from the University of Nottingham in the United Kingdom, specializing on food security in Asia. And she also has a master's in economics from the University of Calcutta with majors in advanced economic theory with honors and econometrics. Ladies and gentlemen, here to discuss increasing climate resilience in agriculture, Anuja Kar. Anuja Kar, you now have the screen.
A very good morning, everyone. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, Anuja.
Okay, thank you so much. I think, Jean, you're going to put up the presentation. Okay, thank you, and a very good morning, everyone, or good evening or good afternoon from whichever part of the world you're joining. It is an absolute pleasure to be speaking at the SEARCA event, such a and amongst the distinguished panel. I will be, as part of today's presentation, I will be primarily focusing on the agriculture deep dive of the CCDR report. It's just a certain sectoral focus that we have undertaken as part of the CCDR. Can we go to the first slide, please? Thank you. In the first slide, so first I will focus a little bit on the global context, and then we'll basically move on to the Philippines context, and then I'll spend some time on the policy recommendation. So let us give a little bit about or understand the challenge of climate change globally. Now, the overarching concern regarding the future of food and agriculture is whether the global system will be able to sustainably feed humanity up to 2050. As we know that the increased population, income, and urbanization all drive up the demand for food, and changes in people's dietary preferences towards more resource intensive animal products and processed food. Globally, currently, the population projection stands around 10 billion. So obviously, the challenge is how do we feed the global population, as agriculture production is constrained by increased scarcity, diminished quality of land and water resources. Now, one side, agriculture is obviously at the receiving end, but on the other side, agriculture is also contributing to climate change through emission of GHG. So broadly speaking, the challenge is that unless we act now, the agriculture emissions likely to be 70% of total allowable emissions for all sectors by 2050, which is an enormous challenge to address. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Now, obviously, there is an intricate link between between climate change and food security. Let us first focus on the part where agriculture or the food security is at the receiving end because of higher climate shocks. Now, obviously, it arises from erratic climate conditions, higher temperature, changing precipitation patterns, greater frequency of extreme weather events, raise potential for food system disruptions along the value chain. Global food insecurity had already been rising due in large part of the climate phenomena. Global warming is influencing weather patterns, causing heat waves, heavy rainfall, droughts. This is one of the key aspect which has contributed to rising prices across the globe, and quadruple actually with other factors, as we have recently seen, for example, other external shocks such as the war, the Russia-Ukraine war, and then pandemic. So taking everything together, one of the critical aspects which is actually concerning for the food security is rising prices. And approximately all these factors taken together, 30 million additional people in the low-income countries are currently and on the verge of facing higher or severe food insecurity and malnutrition, especially in the low-income countries. Now, the rising temperature is also accelerating the transpiration from the plants and soil, and there must also be enough water for the crops to thrive. For the areas of the world where already facing such a water constraint, the climate change will increasingly cause adverse impacts on agricultural production through diminishing water supplies, increasing extreme events like floods, severe storms, heat stress, and increased prevalence of pests and diseases. And some of them we are already seeing adversely impacting, especially all over the world in the low-income countries, of course, the Philippines. Please go to the next slide. Now, the impact or the link between climate change to food security can be linked via two sort of channels. So the first is, let us focus a little bit on the access side. As I explained before, that historically or all over the world, the climate change has directly linked to incidence of higher food prices. And this is definitely causing adversely impacting the availability of food, and because of higher, it is increasing rising the cost of food, and it is explicitly adversely impacting the vulnerable groups. The second thing is also the impact on land use, declining agricultural productivity, which is, of course, the climate change is adversely, and I will be going over also some of the results that we have estimated in the report as part of this study, that the biggest impact is actually on agriculture side is on the production and productivity side, when the climate change is having a huge impact on the productivity, which is broadly leads to the need of additional cropland and rangeland. The second thing is, of course, through the channel of the impact on the food safety and on the human health. Now, climate change can influence food safety by changing the population dynamics and contaminating of the organisms. And impact also on food quality. It includes both the direct effects on climate change on the plant and animal biology, as well as the indirect impact through the carbon dioxide fertilization. Next slide, please. So obviously, Philippines has been at the receiving end, as we all know. The agriculture sector bears the large share of the damage from the climate-related hazards. According to the Philippine Statistics Authority, the damage from the natural extreme events and disasters between 2010 to 2019 was estimated around USD 9 billion. And the agriculture damage accounted for 63% of this value, so which is extremely high. Of these extreme events of disasters that the Philippines has faced over the years, the vast majority, almost 120, were meteorological disasters, with 16 are geophysical disasters like volcanic activities and earthquakes, and 2 meteorological incidents. This may be underestimated also. There might be more than this. The agriculture damage mainly occurs from the meteorological disasters like typhoon in 81% of the time, followed by the climatological disasters like droughts and El Nino in 18% of the cases, according to PSA statistics. So overall, these climate hazards like typhoon, floods, droughts negatively affected the production of staple crop, rice, livestock, and fisheries over the years. Next slide, please. Now, of course, as I said, that the impact, it has adverse impact on both production, productivity, as well as on the food stability. The areas that depend on rain-fed, rain-fed agriculture and livestock will tend to fare worse in this situation as far as the impact of climate change on agriculture is considered. Whereas areas where most of the agriculture is irrigated will tend to fare better, but given the fact that the water flows remain sufficient, the infrastructure needed to store and distribute the water remains functional. Reduced agricultural production will lead to, of course, higher prices, as I said, causing significant hardship. Large price increases, according to our estimate, are foreseen across the board, with biggest jump affecting corn, rice, and fruits and vegetables. The poor who spend the greater amount of share of their income on food will be the most affected. As a result of climate change, the number of people at a risk of hunger is projected to increase by 8% by 2030 and almost 12.8% by 2050. Of course, these are conditions which are not adjusted with adaptation. Once we include the situation of adaptation, I will explain that later. Then obviously a lot of this impact can be mitigated. Next slide, please. Now, as far as we have seen the impact of climate change on agriculture, now we see the other side of the story, which is how actually agriculture is also affecting climate change. Now, of course, Philippine agriculture contributes to the GHG emissions. I mean, this is one of the largest contributors after energy and transport. And the 2 key contributors here are rice as well as livestock. The agriculture generates about 65 metric ton of carbon dioxide equivalent, or about a quarter of the national emission. Emissions from agriculture production arise primarily from methane and nitrous oxide emissions from the rice production and livestock. Therefore, agriculture can also provide mitigation solutions. So it's not just being vulnerable to climate shocks, but it's also causing climate shocks. And as a result, agriculture can also be part of the solution. Agriculture has been a major also cause of forest loss in the country, amounting approximately 90% of the 1.3 million hectares of the tree cover lost from 2000 to 2021, which is equivalent of 788 metric ton of carbon dioxide or equivalent emissions, which is pretty astonishing. Next slide, please. Now, of course, here we would like to spend a little bit on the rice, given the fact that rice has been one of the most important crops in the country, but at the same time, rice is also one of the largest contributors of GHG emission in the country. Now, the GHG emission, there are 2 major sources here. Firstly, the methane from the decomposition of organic amendments for fertilization. And the secondly, the methane emissions from the anaerobic decomposition of the rice straw and husk, and which is not just actually applicable for the Philippines, but also in major countries, including in India, which has wherever the rice production is important, is one of the largest contributors of methane, and it is actually one of the key areas of concerns across the region. Apart from that, there are also other sources of emission. For example, the carbon dioxide burning of rice residues, which is after the harvest. Again, this has been one of the critical challenge for many developing countries all over the world. And then, of course, another critical challenge is the post-harvest losses due to the value chain efficiency. And here, obviously, the lower milling efficiency, which is again a concern for the Philippines, approximately 63%, which is contributing to also GHG emission. Now, the fact that coming to the livestock sector, just a little bit on it, the livestock sources of methane are also enteric fermentation and the poor manure management. And in the Philippines also, there are industries, for example, the water buffalo industry, which is responsible for the highest emissions from these fermentations. Hogs are also the largest source of manure-related emissions, and the backyard small commercial farms usually generate more untreated and ill-disposed waste due to farrow to wind operations. So these are some of the, again, challenging points as far as the livestock sector is considered. Next slide, please. Now, as part of the CCDR work, we carried out some empirical analysis using the CGE model, and there, obviously, as expected, some of the largest impact of climate change is witnessed in a reduction of rice corn yield, which is basically together almost amounting to 67% until 2050. And also a huge impact on loss of land. That is the direct impact of climate change. The indirect impact of climate change is relatively less. However, it is also quite significant, relatively smaller than the direct impact. But this is mainly the reduction in the labor productivity as well as the loss of capital stock. Now, there are also certain sensitivity analysis that had been carried out as part of this modeling exercise, and this shows that there is almost in a high sensitive scenario, almost 6.4% impact on overall on the aggregate capital stock through 2050 as a result of climate change or climate shocks. Next slide, please. Now, a lot of this impact can be reversed if considering when we consider, and later on, I'll spend a little bit of a time on how we sort of, witness some of these scenarios in a more operational ground. When we include when we include the situation where considering the adaptation. So for example, there a lot of this impact can be reversed. The direct impact on agricultural yield then may increase because of measures even compared to the baseline scenario. So we see that literally if the adaptation situation is budgeted into the model, as far as the long-term impact is considered, then the impact on rice yield will actually positive, which is 1.9% as compared to what we had seen previously, which is a double-digit decline without the adaptation scenario. And then the increase in corn yield will be 0.05%, so which is again reversed as compared to what we had seen in the long term until 2050. Again, as far as the capital stock is considered, infrastructure related damage can also be reversed, which is almost 68% as compared to what we had seen previously. And remaining impacts come mostly actually from the typhoon. Next slide, please. So here, actually, we would like to spend a little bit of our time on the climate smart agriculture, which is essentially how to respond to the climate change. I mean, here we have also talked, again, I would like to also give a little bit of a disclaimer here that when we are talking about the impact of climate change, we have, and as far as the modeling results are also considered, due to a lack of evidence, we could not actually have a very intensive result on what will be the other way around, like how much agriculture is contributing to climate shocks. So that part hasn't been worked out, but this is also very important. But we primarily focused on the impact of climate change on agriculture. So, but as far as responding to this, we focus on both sides, which is basically adaptation, as well as on the mitigation side, that how agriculture can also be part of the solutions. And climate smart agriculture, next slide, please. And climate smart agriculture is actually provides this triple win solutions to all these challenges that already I have mentioned previously. So climate smart agriculture is an approach essentially that helps to guide the action to transform and reorient agricultural system to effectively support development and ensure food security in a changing climate. Essentially, it basically provides a three-way solution. First, it is sustainably increasing agricultural productivity and incomes. Secondly, adapting and building resilience to climate change. And thirdly, reducing or removing greenhouse gas emissions where possible. So of course, it is talking about the resilience part in the first place. In the second place, it is talking about more on the adaptation side, that how it can reduce the impact of climate change. And on the third part, it is talking about how to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions where possible. And again, these solutions are very much tied to what I explained already as far as the rice and the livestock subsectors are considered. So for the Philippines case, what will be then the potential areas? Again, some of these recommendations that I will be mentioning currently are backed by evidence that we have found globally, and we try to contextualize that with the Philippines in the current context based on the evidence that is available. But one of the key aspect here is to generate more evidence, and that's where I think like institutions like SEARCA, we can play a huge role here, and academia in general can play a huge role to essentially fill in this gap. So the first thing, and again, it is coming back to the government side, is to reform agricultural support policies that can encourage adoption of diversified production system. We have seen in the Philippines, there has been so much emphasis on rice production, but it is also time to step back and think about that the rice production and the technologies that are currently in place, are they really providing or contributing to this mitigation effort that we have seen elsewhere, for example, in Brazil, in Vietnam, Indonesia, where already there are so much efforts are in place in order to use rice as a key instrument of low carbon or key instrument to move to low carbon agriculture. So this is one of the area, but at the same time, and again, in the subsequent slide, you can also see that based on the limited evidence, what we have found that in the Philippines, in some of the regions where crop rotations or where diversification are in place, we have seen a visible impact on emission reductions, as well as higher profitability for smallholder farmers. So focus on diversification remains a very critical aspect in order, as part of this climate smart agriculture agenda. The second thing is improving the water management and pricing policies that can increase efficient use of water. Now here, for example, the policies which are currently in place that undercut the adoption of climate smart production technologies include, for example, free irrigation water, then relying on non-volumetric water charges based not on the quality, not on the quantity of water used, but also but on the area of land irrigated. And these are clearly linked to inefficient use of water, which is again contributing to a higher GHG emission. Third, and very important, again, as witnessed globally, gradually phasing out for fertilizer subsidies or any form of input subsidies that are not productive, and rather focusing that on productive areas which can directly contribute to better adoption of climate smart technologies. Then the next is to support policy reform. It is to better track. And again, this is probably one of the central piece of making sure that climate smart agriculture is accepted, because without evidence, currently the thing is that there is the testing and the implementation also remains extremely challenging. So to support the policy reform, it is better to track climate smart agriculture, from the budget tracking to allocation to monitoring the adoption of locally appropriate CSA technologies, CSA practices, to setting up the monitoring, reporting, and verification system. And this is where actually countries like Indonesia and Vietnam are playing very important role. The MRVs, which many actually also part of some of the World Bank lending projects, which are now currently trying to test the implementation of MRVs, because this is one of a critical way to better track the GHG emissions in agriculture, to enable better. Also, it is one of the key instrument of getting better access to climate finance. The next is increased public investment that can be directed towards generating information about climate change impacts and appropriate responses. Again, these all are also interlinked with how to track CSAs better. Much climate change research exists in the Philippines already, but again, everything is very much centered around rice. But the research must expand into other important topics such as integrated and upland and rain-fed system, and how to combine essentially the adaptation and the mitigation system. This is one of the critical area actually where I think most of the research currently face within in the Philippines, but also in some part of the world, where the evidence of on adaptation is actually ample, but as far as the mitigation is considered, that's where it is always challenging to find good evidence. And that's where I think that academia also can play a very important role to better track and combine adaptation and mitigation monitoring. The next is enhanced system that can disseminate relevant information to the farmers. Now, of course, there can be a lot of information, but at the end, the main thing is whether the farmers are able to accept, digest, and implement some of these climate smart solutions. So the next actually couple of recommendations that talks about are very important in order to strengthen the extension system and make it more friendly towards the smallholder farmers, because in many cases it has seen that these technologies, for example, the alternate wet and dry, and we have also tested that in some of the project related data that we had gathered, that if the AWD has been just given to the farmer as a single package, versus AWD comes with a package where it is combined with extension, it is combined with efficient subsidies, it is smart subsidies basically, to adopt some of the climate smart technologies, then the impact of AWD on productivity is way more higher, and it is actually can contribute to GHG emission or emission at a much higher rate. So the policies to support research and extension, therefore, must be better and contextualized locally. linkages between extension and the need for farmers and of the private sector can be improved, including through products such as information services from the Philippines, atmospheric, geophysical, and astronomical services administration, PAGASA, then the national weather agencies. So the fact is that there are currently a lot of information available, but how to package and better pass them on to the smallholder farmers, more making them locally relevant, that is a critical area where, of course, the government can play a very important role in collaboration with other stakeholders, including the NGOs, academia, and also with the help of the private sector. Another critical aspect here is to the barriers to commodity participation can be lowered by ensuring inclusion in the climate smart agricultural planning. Now, here, one clear lesson that we have seen actually all over the world in terms of promoting the climate smart agriculture approaches is that, especially those which are based on integrated land management, that these solutions can only be sustained if there is a strong community ownership of ownership present in the country. So the farming communities are unlikely to embrace such climate smart practices unless they have participated in a socially inclusive process of developing and implementing plans. They have participated in directly in policies to implement them. So, and here actually, again, the role of women, the role of youth, other vulnerable groups, indigenous population can be instrumental. For livestock farmers to adopt GHG mitigation measures, a range of tools and incentives will be needed. There are several technologies for GHG mitigations which are identified, and we have also outlined that in our report, which includes reducing the enteric fermentation through change feeds, more localized feeding sources, better manure management, biogas production, better animal health and feeding system, and also to create healthier and more efficient stock, thus to reduce the GHG emission. Now, finally, widening the availability of finance products that can help support the implementation of climate smart agriculture. The government policies related to financial markets can be enable the development, firstly, of the instruments such as crop insurance. Of course, it is one of the key instruments actually that can help mitigate the risk from weather shocks, and secondly, of appropriate lending instrument to finance climate smart investments. And here again, a very important aspect of it is to create enabling environment for the private sector to come on board and also be part of this whole ecosystem. And lastly, the establishment of, as I also mentioned, robust monitoring and evaluation system. And one of the critical aspect here is this monitoring, reporting, and verification MRV system to essentially contribute to reduce or track GHG emissions, and also to monitor climate co-benefits that ensure accountability, transparency, and also good governance. Now, in the next two slides, basically, we just have presented some of these examples, not a lot of examples that we were able to find, but some small examples where we did some of the testing using project level data. Where we see that, for example, crop rotation with AWD irrigation system and rice intensification has, again, these are some of the aspects which has contributed to higher financial return for the farmers, but at the same time, it has also contributed to emission reduction Another thing, obviously, the crop rotation, for example, in Kar and Visayas, we found that the rice and onion crop rotation with early maturing rice cultivators has contributed or generated a substantial financial return for the farmers, as well as contributed to the emission reduction. And similarly, in the Northeast Luzon and Visayas, the yellow corn groundnuts rotation with drought-resistant yellow corn, and also implementation of some of the climate smart technologies has contributed to a significant reduction of GHG emissions, as well as generated higher financial return for smallholder farmers. Next slide, please. So actually, I mean, before going, I mean, the last slide can you go to the next slide? Because then I will come the last slide actually. Yeah, this one. So before going on to the key 3 priority areas, I would like to spend a little bit of a time that what the government can play a very important role in this regard is what we call the repurposing the agricultural policies for better outcomes. And again, this is not just relevant for the Philippines, but it is also relevant all over the region where similar threats and challenges are currently faced. So the first thing is, of course, providing direct producer support could be coupled with GHG mitigation and improved soil and water quality. The second is land conservation and retirement payments could be targeted to enhance water quality and biodiversity, create incentives to protect the forested and peatlands and restore low productivity land. Research and technical assistance, again, this is one of the area, as I also mentioned before, that's where a lot of this unproductive public finance, which is currently going on subsidies, which is actually contributing to higher subsidies, actually contributing to overuse of fertilizer, and which is again contributing to GHG emission, can be reduced through repurposing those through research and technical assistance that can help better targeting some of the areas as measurement and also higher adoption of climate smart technologies, as well as the strengthening the extension system, those can be achieved. And then, of course, input and irrigation subsidies could be repurposed, as I already said. And then the final thing is direct producer support could be tied to protecting forest and biodiversity. Now, can you go to the previous slide? Yeah. So all in all, if we have to identify like the top high priority area in terms of the policy recommendation, is to accelerate adoption of improved practices such as AWD, but AWD only cannot be a panacea. It has to be combined with other technologies together, especially catered with the smallholder farmers, and definitely it has to come with a very strong extension system, again, more community buy-in and other aspect which will help to penetrate some of these technologies to smallholder farmers who are actually at the receiving end. The other aspect is developing fishery management. I did not talk much about the fishery sector in my presentation, but maybe next week you will hear more on that. But fishery management plans that incorporate adaptive management based on ongoing data changes in mitigation pattern and stocking rates, etc. The medium priority will be improved resilience in agriculture through diversification. Again, this has been clearly witnessed through our data at the subnational level, where we have seen that like single cropping pattern is not going to help, and always the intercropping and crop rotation has a significant impact in terms of GHG emission, as well as ensuring higher financial return for the farmers, and also extend irrigation in the rain-fed areas, which is, of course, at the receiving end currently of many of these climate shocks. So with that, I would like to conclude my presentation. Maraming salamat. Thank you so much. And I'll look forward to any questions that you may have. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Anuja, for your presentation. So let's dive further into the details of the agriculture chapter of CCDR as we now move on to our open forum. So just a reminder, I would like to invite our online attendees watching the webinar via Facebook Live to please start typing your questions in the comments section, including your location and or country of origin. And if you're tuned in via Zoom, please post your questions in the Q&A box, which you will find in the menu bar on your screen. So I now would like to invite Dr. Dina O'Malley Deininger, Practice Manager for Agriculture and Food Global Practice of East Asia and the Pacific of the World Bank, as well as Dr. Stefano Pajola, Senior Environmental Economist and Lead Author of the Philippine CCDR, to join Ms. Anuja Kar for the open forum. All right, so let us kick off this Q&A by first discussing if the results of the report were already cascaded to the Philippine government, what action items were discussed and shared, and what we can look forward to. So which do you think should which areas do you think should the Philippine government pay more attention to or prioritize first at the very least based on the report? Maybe Anuja first.
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Sorry. It's which areas if the report was already cascaded to the Philippine government and if action items were discussed, what can we all look forward to? Which areas should you think the Philippine government should prioritize first and pay more attention to based on the report?
Well, as I mentioned in my presentation, I think one of the top two areas will be first to look into the existing policy and find ways. And this is somewhere I think the Department of Agriculture and the government of Philippines has already doing a great job in terms of trying to see how can the existing public investment. This has been a long-standing discussion, also policy discussion that the World Bank has been having with the government, is how to repurpose the spending, because that's the direct effect that can really influence better adaptation as well as mitigation as far as the adaptation and mitigation is considered, in terms of repurposing the spending from the unproductive, which is going on, again, higher fertilizer use or other technologies which are not basically practices which are not helping the smallholder farmers, towards more on research and extension system, as well as the second thing I think where the government can play a very important role is strengthening the monitoring system, which is through the MRVs. And that's where I think there are lessons already available, even regionally, where we are seeing that government, for example, in Vietnam and Indonesia, they're coming up, with solutions or small pilots where these MRVs are implemented and where GHG emission can be tracked. And this is, again, this can be also an excellent way to attract more climate finance into the picture, because as soon as you are able to measure some of these GHG emission, then you can get, and Dina can also get in here as far as the practice which is implemented in Vietnam, where how can you measure the GHG emission, and which can then translate into acquiring climate finance. So this is one of the areas where I think the government can, the two areas where currently repurposing the policy, and the second thing is in strengthening the monitoring system, one of the two critical areas where the government can play a huge role. And of course, all these also include enabling environment for the private sector to get into the picture and actually, strengthen the ecosystem, because it's not one party solution, given it's such a huge agenda.
All right, thank you, Anuja. You mentioned Dr. Dina. Dr. Dina, would you like to add something?
Maybe let me hand it over to Stefano to talk about the overall dissemination of the report in our dialogue with government, and I can come in with some examples from Vietnam. Over to you, Stefano.
Thank you, Dina. Thank you, Anuja. Yes, so we've had a number of dissemination events around the CCDR, beginning with an event that was held jointly with the Climate Change Commission in late October. and then followed up by a series of events targeting particular agencies and departments. We had a very large event, for example, with DENR, also in late October, that was attended by over 400 people, both online and in person. And we continue. And this event today is an example of the dissemination that we're doing, and the event that we'll be having next week, in which our country director, Mr. Ndiop, will also participate, is another example. In fact, we have a full schedule of dissemination events, and we try to do a range of events at all scales. Some of them targeted, such as this one, looking specifically at agriculture. Some of them more general, looking at overall results. If there are agencies or groups that would like to have a discussion with us, please get in touch with our communications team and the country office, and we'd be happy to work with them to see how we can do that. Over to you, Dina.
Thanks, Stefano. So let me just elaborate a bit on what it really means to deal with climate change and climate smart agriculture on the ground. So we have been working with a Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development of Vietnam on rice, because, as you know, Vietnam is a big rice exporter, but they're really very concerned about the impact of climate change, both on the adaptation end, because they're now getting droughts and floods, and sometimes they have too much water and sometimes they have too little water. But at the same time, there's the issue of greenhouse gas emissions. As Anuja mentioned, we don't really recognize that every time you eat a bowl of rice, that bowl of rice is associated with a lot of methane emissions, because when you grow the rice in the flooded fields, as Anuja explained, the organic matter deteriorates, you get a lot of methane. And then when you apply a lot of fertilizer and over fertilize, then you get nitrous oxides, which is, I think, like 285 times more damaging than carbon dioxide. So it's really bad also. And then when, like in the Philippines, when you drive around the countryside after harvest, you see all the farmers burning, right? The rice straw, and that adds to carbon dioxide emissions. And actually, it's a major cause of air pollution now in cities like Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi. So we have this project called the Vietnam Sustainable Agriculture Transformation Project. So it was trying to address these triple wins, right? So you increase farmer productivity by encouraging farmers to use better seeds, adapting to climate change by managing the water management and using AWD. So because otherwise you're overusing water, right? And there's not enough water for everybody. And third is also better fertilizer management, because farmers were applying almost 40% more fertilizer than needed, because the perception was more for more. Actually, more means just more expensive, because they're not getting the yield response. And so the idea, and then also to reduce the burning of straw by making them bale it to feed for livestock or to grow mushrooms. And so the idea was to have a more efficient production system that was triple win, adapting to climate change and reducing GHG emissions. So the project covered about 200,000 hectares. And the package of these technologies, because they reduced fertilizer costs, they had higher yields, they actually increased farmer incomes. So actually farmers wanted to adopt it. And so within this 200,000 hectares of area that the project covered, the farmers had better yields, better income, but we were able to reduce also the emissions from rice by 1 million tons per year. And so now we're helping the government of Vietnam take this 1 million tons of emission reduction and then get climate finance for it. So we have applied to the Transformative Carbon Asset Facility, and the facility is willing to pay as much as $10 per ton. So for the 1 million, the government of Vietnam will now get about $10 million in payment for the emission reductions, which we're now trying to develop an approach to take it back to the farmer. So this $10 million payment for emission reduction will will then be either finance some of the activities that the farmers are doing, or uh, uh, or cover for the investments. Now, the good news is this emission reductions, the government can use it to meet their nationally determined contributions, yeah, for emission reductions. Or they can also have the option to sell it in the private carbon market. And in Singapore, where I am based, there are now companies looking for these emission reduction credits, especially from agriculture, especially because they're coming from smallholder farmers. And then they're willing to pay as much as $30 per ton. So there are also economic opportunities for doing this triple wins. The only point, though, is that it's very important to have this MRV, or the measurement, reporting, and verification system, to quantify how much really was emission reductions are reduced. And in Vietnam, we work with the International Rice Research Institute, which is also in Los Baños, to help us do the measurement. So this is a kind of a more on the ground level practical application, and we're happy to share that experience if anyone else is interested. So thank you. Back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Dina. So you were discussing climate finance earlier, and given the Vietnam case that you mentioned, how do you think can the academe and even industries, because here at SEARCA, that's what we really try to push for, the academe, industry, and government linkages, help in mobilizing this on the ground, as you mentioned?
Okay, so what's very important first is to get the new practices adopted by farmers, right? And that was what Anuja was saying. We really have to strengthen the extension system. And we don't have to do the traditional, I have to have an extension officer go to the farmer. You can do digital, like through the mobile phone, through Facebook, and we have to be more modern. And so get the farmers to adopt it, and then have a system to measure it. You can work with ERI, which is or some other Philippine rice still rice, right? They can do that too. And then of course work with the Department of Agriculture to implement the program, because they also have to kind of modernize the irrigation system to have more water control. So as Anuja said, you have to have an integrated package of support. But at the same time, change your policy that you don't focus too much on rice, but also diversification, because diversification is also good for climate change adaptation. Anuja, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, Jean, just to add here what Dina mentioned, I think the role of academia is extremely important. For example, there are like core expertise that are also required in order for some of these instruments to be more successful, MRVs. For example, in some of the developed world, I'm just giving an example where academia had played instrumental role in terms of developing the modules to estimate, report GHG emissions, conduct key source analysis, consistency and completeness checks, exporting to and importing from like databases, inventory management, archiving and finalizing the GHG inventories. And again, here is like a nexus. The government can also play a very important role to bringing in these resources to invest in, as I said, in research and extension, so that some of these aspects, even universities can build their capacity and can get into some of these core expertise where already many players all over the world are jumping in and playing a very crucial role. So I think academia can step up and can play a very important role, especially as far as the monitoring system is considered. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Anuja. Since we are discussing players, and because I am from the youth, my next question would be, what policies would you recommend that will enable youth participation? Say, as is the case of the Philippines, I mentioned this to Anuja earlier, there are a lot of efforts. SEARCA, for one, we do have a youth ambassadors platform, but campaigning or maybe having us included in the conversation is quite difficult. So from your perspective, from the bank, what policies would you recommend that will enable this sort of youth participation and empowerment, at least for the Philippines?
You want me to go first?
All right, Anuja.
Maybe Dina and Stefano, please come in here as well, based on what we have seen elsewhere. But one of the key aspects, again, as Dina mentioned, that digital is something we have seen again in some of the countries where is a very quick sort of way to incentivize more and more youth participation. And because traditional agriculture, traditional instrument, including, sort of climate solutions, may not incentivize youth to participate in this important dialogue. But as far as digital adoptions are considered, I mean, this has been witnessed in elsewhere in the world as well, can incentivize more and more youth to participate, not just in sort of, these activities, but also be more, a little bit more engaged into how to make agriculture more climate smart. Because see, the thing is that a lot of these practices which are currently in place, which are in fact contributing to some of these, which I already mentioned as far as rice cultivation is considered, contributing to higher GHG emission, are linked with traditional agriculture. And as far as the youth participation is considered, again, overarching across the value chain. So it is more important that we make agriculture a little bit more smarter. And I think digital adoption is one of the very key area where the youth participation can be increased, as well as, I mean, again, the youth participation to make youth more incentivized to join the dialogue. It is also important to sort of create this entrepreneurial environment, because again, we are seeing that, for example, a higher youth participation is also linked to better enabling environment, for example, for private sector, because it is also, again, taking back from the traditional approach and making agriculture a little bit more smarter, using a more public-private environment, which can provide better dividends for the youth to be part of this dialogue or this part of this process. So, but Dina and Stefano, please.
Okay, so maybe I can come here. I think the challenge is how, to get more young people to come to agriculture, we have to figure out how to make agriculture cool, right? Like, can it be the same? They would not want to be like their parents who are tilling the soil with a buffalo, or doing the same things that we do now. So in a lot of countries, as Anuja said, the way, one way to attract them is to make agriculture not so arduous, right? So in some countries, they have the equivalent of Grab tractor services. So you have a mobile phone, you put in your request to say, I need my field plowed at a certain time. So they come and you quote the price and they come. In another country, I think in Kenya, they have what they call a DigiCow app, wherein you go place your app and say, my animal is sick, I need a vet, can you come? Please come. And they tell you what it is. And then they provide also, they sell veterinary medicine plus, feed for the animals. And then the same thing for fish. Some companies in Indonesia, for example, they are providing kind of precision fish feeding. So you just don't throw the feed into the water and let the fish feed. They have this automatic dispenser for feeds at certain times. That's not very expensive. And then they have an arrangement to buy the fish afterwards from the farmer. So by making it more sophisticated and modern, young people are now coming in to do agriculture. But the idea is, how do we bring these kind of innovative ideas more into the Philippines, so more young people will see it as a business, and a nice business, to be able to be engaged in agriculture. So that's all from me.
Thank you, Dr. Dina. Dr. Stefano?
Yes, thank you. I think there's not going to be any silver bullet here. There's not one magic thing that we can do that will solve all the problems. It's a very broad problem that affects lots of people in very different ways. And so, as we've heard, we need to work with all the various groups. We need to work with academia. We need to work with the government agencies. We need to work with local government units. We need to work with individual commercial firms, with individual households. We need to work with everybody if we're going to address this problem successfully. In terms of the youth, that's clearly going to be a critical group, because in the future they will be the labor force. They will be the economic actors. They will be the decision makers. And an important aspect here, I think, is that addressing climate change will often require doing things differently. We have to change how we do rice, for example, as we've heard repeatedly during the presentation today. Change how we irrigate, change how we apply the water, change how we fertilize, perhaps change the species, rotate them with other crops. And as somebody who is not quite so young as I used to be, I know that it becomes harder and harder to change. Your habits become ingrained, and it becomes harder to do new things as your hair gets grayer. So we have a big opportunity here to work with a group before they get set into a number of essentially harmful practices, for things that may have made a lot of sense at one point, but are now contraindicated. So I think it's very important. Don't pretend to have the answer of how we should do it, but I think it's important that we should try to make sure that this group, as it moves forward, as it starts to take over economic activities, starts to take over decision making, does it fully understand, does it with a full understanding of the problems that we face, climate change being a very important one, but also many others, so that as they start taking on these decision making roles, they take all these things into account. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stefano. Now we have 3 questions from the audience. First one would be from Vincent Roy Mendoza. Are there any available technology in other countries that measure the methane gas emitted in a rice field? Anyone from the panel who can answer this?
There are now many existing systems. One that, as I mentioned, in Vietnam, which was developed together with ERI. There are also several approaches in China, for example. So in China, measurement of emission reductions is already very kind of a priority, because the government has, I think, put focus on greening transformation or greening economic development. Now, the one thing that we realized very quickly is that right now, most of the measurement is based on some coefficient, right? If you change your fertilizer use, you will reduce GHG emissions by X amount. If you change water use, you will reduce GHG emissions by X amount. What's, I think, very important to recognize, though, is that these coefficients are location specific. And so in the Philippines, if we need to develop one that's also location specific, because what may be the responses, for example, in Luzon may be different in responses in Mindanao, for example, if you're growing rice. So I think that's where academia can be very important, or field rice can be very important, to develop these methodologies that are tailored to the location and still be recognized internationally as a good measurement, right? So there's a lot of work to be done in the Philippines to develop these coefficients at home.
Thank you, Dr. Dina. So since you're mentioning, since we just mentioned location, we actually just have a question from Cagayan de Oro, Philippines. This is from Dennis Ivan Chavez. It came from Facebook. Are there existing technologies or projects that can be done by students to help monitor GHG emissions? And of course, Dr. Dina just mentioned that this is where the role of the academe comes in. But the person is also asking, how costly is it to make a device that can monitor GHG?
So the MRV systems, first, let me say the MRV systems for agriculture is still in the infancy. It's not like energy, we all have the formulas ready. We don't have the measurements ready. But in agriculture, it's still work in progress, even for livestock, right? And for agriculture. And so how cost effective it is, I cannot say, how expensive it's going to be, because different countries might have, I guess, for example, the labor, the labor cost in the Philippines may be higher than the labor cost in Cambodia, for example, in terms of developing these types of scientific measurements. So, and I think that's where the government can play a very important role to really support these initiatives, right? Whether in academia or in PhilRise or SEARCA initiative, SEARCA projects, but we don't have any project right now in the Philippines on this.
Thank you. Yes, Anuja.
Yes, actually, just to add to Dina, here also we have to be very mindful as far as also the Philippines is considered, that when we are talking about such technology or implementation of such technology and the costing is concerned, we have to first undertake also the capacity needs. And that's where actually a large investments also need to be placed. Because see, again, as also Dina mentioned, and we have seen in multiple of our analysis in the World Bank, that Philippines is a very diverse country. And the regional diversity and the regional sort of need differ quite widely, as well as impact as well. I mean, in fact, the crop yield, the climate impact of climate change on rice yield and corn yield across the region, it varies significantly. So we sort of did like combined analysis, but we have seen that there is significant regional diversity. So capacity needs, institutional needs, all these has to be budgeted in when we are talking about cost. So currently we can say that in the Philippines, of course, given the fact that the baseline is pretty low at this point of time as far as the GHG measurement is considered, so probably the requirement will be higher. But again, it needs to be backed up, and that there the government can play in partnership, strong partnership with academia, think tanks can play a very important role in understanding the capacity needs and also budget that how much will it cost to implement successfully such a system to measure GHG, because it's not a simple solution as well. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Anuja. I have one question here from Dr. Jem Castillo. I was a bit surprised by one slide that showed GHG emission of rice farming in the Philippines is highest among countries presented. Can you provide further details of the measurement of which aspect of rice farming emits the most GHG? Okay.
Yes,
Ms.
sure. I mean, obviously, this is again, I mean, we have done some sort of a macro level analysis. The data is not really near perfect. And one of the critical challenge here is to present it in a standardized format. As far as, the estimation is considered, we found it extremely hard. But as far as the Philippines is considered, there are, as I said, that there are two critical like contributors for rice, or what we have estimated, like what we have witnessed. So the firstly is the methane from the decomposition of organic amendments used of fertilization, which is extremely high in the Philippines. I don't have the number in top of my head, but I'm happy to get back more in detail on that. And the secondly is the methane emission from the anaerobic decomposition of rice straw and husk, which is also quite higher in the Philippines. The other thing, as I said, also, which is contributing to GHG emission is the post-harvest losses, which is also quite higher in terms as far as the Philippines is considered. And again, the milling efficiency, which is also budgeted in, which is also quite high as far as the Philippines is considered. Again, measurement and coming up with the standardized data in this regard has been pretty much a challenge, but the Philippines remain one of the, no doubt, one of the largest contributors as far as the rice subsector is considered in terms of GHG emissions. Thanks.
Thank you, Anuja. Other comments from the panel? All right. Okay, so I have here a question from Genesis Jeff Lamigo. You mentioned about diversification. Are there crops alternative to rice and other high emitting crops that we can seriously consider for Asia and at least in the Philippines? We've heard that abaca is one of them. Are there any other food source crops that we should watch out for?
So yeah, I mean, see, the thing is that based on evidence, we found that the data is not very rich in this regard. But as far as the one of the thing that we found that the potatoes and green cabbage, which sort of yielded a higher financial return. The other thing is that the rice onion crop rotation that has actually contributed to significant GHG reduction. And again, the other thing is the yellow corn cultivation also has contributed. Now, here I would like to actually highlight something. I mean, this is some analysis that we carried out a couple of years back, where currently in the Philippines, there are areas which are like sort of the crop suitability, for example, is a challenge in the Philippines currently, because many areas which are cultivating rice are not suited to actually cultivate any other crop. So that's also one of the very big challenge, and which is actually sort of, kind of increasing some of this, the contribution, because there are, if there's like rice, then there are very limited option to cultivate anything else. But still, based on the existing evidence, we found in some of the subnational cases that, as I said, that the yellow corn and onion actually contributed or did quite significant impact on emission reduction.
Actually, can I add also, and this is something we don't always recognize, that when you have fruit trees, like kind of like agroforestry, you can also contribute to carbon sequestration. It's like forests. You have trees that sequester carbon. In Africa, they call it part of landscape management. So they were actually measuring the carbon sequestration potential from, I think, growing some fruit trees, and including like coffee and cocoa. However, we do have to be careful that they are grown sustainably, that they're not causing, you're not cutting forests to grow coffee or cocoa. But in some areas where you can grow coffee or cocoa, mangoes, tamarind or whatever, these trees also sequester carbon. And so if we can grow them sustainably, that can be also, it's kind of a win-win. You have economic returns, you can prevent erosion, and then you can also sequester carbon. That's also another triple win that we haven't really recognized in agriculture. That's what I'm saying. I think we can do more in agriculture. It's just we haven't really taken advantage of it because the focus has always been on energy. But I think this is something that has great potential in the Philippines also.
Thank you, Dr. Dina. We have here one question from Ms. Jean Sorahido from the Department of Public Works and Highways of the Philippines. First would be that how can delivery the farmers the proper information and innovation? How do we deliver proper information and innovation to the farmers to enhance the quality of foods and services? And how can we help farmers increase or innovate their programs so that their income will increase despite the goods being not properly delivered in the market? Yes.
Well, as I said, Jean, also in the presentation, this is one of the fundamental aspects, how to deliver the information, because it has to be also sort of more localized, contextualized, and this is where I think a very strong extension system can play a huge role. Also the extension system which is sort of promoting community participation, which is sort of planned in a more inclusive manner, including youth, women, and other vulnerable groups, and essentially processing some of this information in a much more accessible, understandable, and also actionable manner, so that farmers are sort of getting it, but at the same time they are able to process some of this information and implement them in a much more sort of convenient manner. So again, importance of the extension system, public extension system becomes extremely critical here, which can play a very important role. But at the same time, also community level planning and community participation also can be extremely important as far as, for example, the indigenous population is considered, which is again, if you take the case of Mindanao, which is extremely vulnerable and the hosting a large sort of indigenous population who are at the risk of also, at the receiving end of some of this climate impact, very targeted and sort of extension system can help them to understand the importance of some of these technologies, but it has to be also attuned and customized, and there has to be a lot of emphasis on capacity development and targeted capacity development in order to deliver some of this information.
I actually, just adding to what Anuja said, the challenge we face in the Philippines is we have millions of very small farmers, right? It's going to be very hard to reach each and every one of them. And some good experience under our Philippine Rural Development Project is that it's more effective if you organize them into a group or an association. And then you provide the extension to them in terms of adopting good practices, but also how to organize them to access market information, to sell, because eventually the buyers, they don't want to deal with 500 farmers, right? They would prefer to deal with a group of farmers with bigger volume and have a better quality control, grading of products. So I think the institutional side of how we also help our farmers are quite important. Now, the big, large commercial farmers, they can pay for their extension. But for the smaller farmers, it's also more cost effective for them to get the extension information as a group, because they can also use that platform to share experiences with each other, right? On what worked on their farm or what didn't work on their farm. And it makes it accessible also for, like I said, these youth who might want to set up a business, that they sell provide extension, sell seeds and fertilizer also to a group. So that also generates a kind of a multiplier effect for some of the youth who might want to get into business in agriculture.
Thank you,
I can just add a few words here. I think an important aspect of sharing information here is that we need to provide information in ways that is useful and meaningful to people. It's not very helpful to tell a poor farmer, for example, oh, look, if you do this, you'll reduce emissions that will change global warming. And that's not something that is a priority for them. I mean, they need to feed their children, they need to buy clothes for them, send them to school. What's happening in the global economy is the last thing they're going to think about. So we need to not be lecturing at them how they should be providing favors for society, but provide information about how different activities would benefit them. Just as an example, that's not agriculture. If you look, for example, at the cost of building an energy efficient building or the price of buying an electric car, those are both higher than the cost of building a standard building or the cost of buying a car with internal combustion engine. But then the maintenance costs and the fuel costs of the energy efficient building, the energy costs to the owner of running an electric car dramatically lower. So we need to make sure that those long-term benefits are clear. Otherwise, people will only see the price tag of the energy efficient building and say, oh my God, it's so much more expensive. That's not for me, right? You need to show them what it means for them to then have a more energy efficient building, a more energy efficient vehicle. And the same thing in agriculture. What does it mean for them? What does it mean for their productivity, for their cost of production? If we don't present it that way, it's simply going to be something else that just isn't very relevant.
Actually, also to add to Stefano here, I mean, in this case, non-state actors can play a very important role to sort of, communicate this messages in a much more accessible manner. whether to farmers or to farmer cooperatives or groups, as Dina mentioned. I mean, for example, NGOs who have better access to actually grassroots farmers or smallholder farmers can actually help to sort of, fine tune some of this messaging, complex messaging into simplified format and tell them actually what are the actual benefits of some of these technologies if they use, and what essentially will be the value for money for them. And then essentially that's how the adoption rate can increase. And it has happened in Brazil, it has happened in India, where actually non-state actors had played a very important role in terms of, passing on some of these information and help to better adoption of technologies. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Anuja and Dr. Stefano and Dr. Dina. We are about to wrap up, but I just have a few things here that maybe would be able to address questions from the audience. First would be, how do we get in touch with the panel for future reference?
Maybe we all have our email addresses, so maybe our communication team can better address this question actually.
All right.
Teresa, Dave, maybe. Thanks.
All right. Okay. And then there is a comment here from Misamis Oriental. Will there be a World Bank climate report on fisheries? And if so, is there an event on this matter? Fisheries.
Actually, the CCDR, I mean, has certain
Covers
elements
fisheries.
fisheries. So, I mean, we can do another sub-event probably with our colleagues from the fisheries sector. Stefano, what do you say? If there is interest.
The CCDR could not cover everything, and so unfortunately, fisheries is one of the things that we mentioned. We discussed the key issues, but we really could not cover in any depth. I would note, however, that there's a fisheries project that is currently being negotiated, which will do a lot of work in addition to investment work. We'll also do a lot of analytical work regarding fisheries and coastal areas and marine areas. We're also starting a new analytical program, in which we're also hoping to cover coastal and fishery issues. So this is an ongoing workbook. I mean, certainly you should not look at the CCDR as something that covers everything, that has all the answers. It's only one step. I think it's an important step because it's the first time that we've taken such a comprehensive view of how climate change will affect the Philippines. But it's only one step. There's many areas in which, in fact, even in the CCDR itself, we say, look, there's much more that we need to find out about this area. We know we can see maybe the broad direction of things, but we need to have more detail. We need to do more research. We need to gather more information, the kinds of information that Dina was also talking about earlier, make things more specific, make things understand how things work in individual locations, because there's a lot of variability. So specifically on fisheries, this is something that we are working on. I don't know of any specific report that's due anytime soon. Perhaps Dina may have a better sense of what's in the pipeline there. But I know this is an area that we are working on, and that we're happy, we're eager to have a conversation with anyone who has anything to contribute.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Stefano. Okay, so we have a few more questions lined up, but in the interest of time, we will be closing this open forum already. So thank you, Anuja, Dr. Dina, and Dr. Stefano for that very insightful discussion on fleshing out substantial opportunities to increase climate resilience and reduce emissions. Before we close, I apologize that the opening messages were oversighted. So as we close this webinar, I'd like to invite Dr. Dina Umali Deininger again, Practice Manager for Agriculture and Food Global Practice of East Asia and the Pacific of the World Bank, for some takeaway message. Dr. Dina?
Thank you. First, let me thank SEARCA for giving us this opportunity to participate in the SOLVE initiative, or the SEARCA online learning and virtual engagements. This is really a very important and innovative platform for sharing and exchanging knowledge in agriculture and rural development in the region. And we really thank you for giving us the time to share the agriculture findings of our Philippine Country Climate and Development Report. So so I think some of the key takeaway messages. First is that agriculture will always be very important in the Philippines, I think for the coming years, given for food security, employment, and poverty reduction. The second is that agriculture is a victim of climate change with all these climate shocks that already affecting the Philippines, whether it be droughts, floods, or very strong typhoons. But it's also an important contributor to climate change in terms of the GHG emissions from rice, livestock, and other activities. And finally, the good news is there are solutions. There are a lot of climate smart agriculture solutions that we talked about today, which I would say provides the triple wins. First, it could help increase the productivity and incomes of farmers. It can help them adapt to climate change. And third, it can also help with reducing GHG emissions. So there are lots of opportunities, even in the Philippines, to take this forward. And as Stefano said, this is only the start of the conversation. And we look forward to working with you all to really delve deeper into what climate smart agriculture actions that can be taken in the Philippines. So thank you very much. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Dr. Dina. And lastly, for our closing message, Dr. Maria Cristeta N. Quaresma, Senior Program Head of the Education and Collective Learning Department of SEARCA. Ma'am Teta.
Thank you, Jean. On behalf of SEARCA, I extend our gratitude to the World Bank for collaborating with us on this webinar to discuss climate impacts on agriculture, as well as how to increase climate resilience. And this is something that is very important for us at SEARCA. The center in its current 5-year plan on ATTAIN, and that's accelerating transformation through agricultural innovation, we have committed to contribute to 5 sustainable development goals, one of which is SDG 13, to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. And that is why Jean mentioned in the opening earlier that one of our 7 priority areas in the current 5-year plan is on enhanced agricultural and rural development towards climate resilience. We heard from Ms. Anuja earlier that climate change will cause the yield of many crops to decline and reduce farmers' income. Further, the Philippines, where SEARCA is located, the headquarters of SEARCA, the Philippines has been ranked first among 193 countries in the World Risk Index that came out last year, with very high scores in exposure, vulnerability, susceptibility, and lack of coping and adaptive capacities. So the situation seems bleak for us, but that is only if we do not do something or act on these findings. So it was nice to hear that agriculture can also be part of the solution. It was mentioned also earlier that SEARCA could play a big role in determining evidences or practices that could be scaled for a climate smart agriculture agenda. And this is something that we take seriously. And I'm happy to share that among our initiatives, we are in the thick of discussions with partners for a new flagship program on WISE carbon farming, WISE standing for Web-Based Integrated Spatial Engine and Smart Ecosystem. So the central idea being to establish a center to serve as a centralized system to collect, mine, and analyze data related to carbon farming from the different Southeast Asian countries, since we work for the region, not only for the Philippines. And it aims to identify viable carbon farming models in agricultural systems using different climate smart technologies, some of which have been mentioned earlier, that would help reduce carbon emissions, say from rice production until post-production, and hopefully be eventually sold as carbon credits for additional income for farmers. Also something that Anuja and Tina were advocating earlier, that there should be a collection of evidences on how to do low carbon farming. As a kickoff to this project, we are coming up soon with a 2-day stakeholders forum to bring relevant multi-sector partners coming from the academe, the policymakers, those from financing institutions, and development workers doing on-the-ground actions to come together and highlight and exchange experiences, challenges, best practices, strategic directions, and opportunities so we could strategically advance carbon farming in agriculture. The first day is on climate finance and the second day on wise carbon farming. At the end of the forum, we hope to establish a Southeast Asian carbon farming consortium. Despite climate change with us, we are hopeful that with strengthened partnerships and with us working together, we could still come out better, bigger, and smarter. That's actually the battle cry of SEARCA's 11th five-year plan, but we could extend it as a challenge for the agriculture sector in the region. So again, thank you everyone, including our attendees in Zoom and Facebook Live. We invite you to join us in our next seminar on the Philippines Country Climate and Development Report, this time face-to-face in our headquarters at SEARCA. I leave Jean to tell you when it will be. And of course, also in SEARCA Stakeholder Forum, the details of which will soon be disseminated. We hope that these events will continue to provide us an opportunity for a meaningful exchange towards a more resilient and sustainable future. Thank you, everyone, and good morning.
Thank you, Ma'am Tata. So that ends our webinar. But before we close, please let us know what you think about today's solve by following the link to a quick feedback form to be posted in the Facebook live stream video of this webinar. The same link will direct you to the request form for the e-certificate, and your feedback will help us improve our online learning events. Please note that we will only accommodate requests for e-certificates within 24 hours after the end of this webinar. So kindly wait for your e-certificates to be issued at least within a month, as we receive a lot of requests for e-certificates. So thank you for your understanding and patience. As mentioned by Ma'am Tata, please do join us again next week, 16th February, that's Thursday, as we continue to discuss the Philippine Country Climate and Development Report of the World Bank. Through the SEARCA Agriculture and Development Seminar Series, the event will be held face-to-face, again, between the partnership between SEARCA and the World Bank, and it will be at Umali Auditorium. So yes, we are inviting you to come over to here in Los Baños in SEARCA. The presentation will again be streamed via Zoom and Facebook Live. So please do head over to SEARCA's Facebook page to register. This will be again on 16th February, next Thursday at 10 o'clock Philippine time, 10 a.m. We will have with us Dr. Stefano Pajola, World Bank Senior Environmental Economist, and Dr. Solimane Coulibaly, World Bank Lead Economist and Program Leader for Equitable Growth, Finance, and Institutions Practice Group for Brunei, Malaysia, Philippines, and Thailand. And we also will have with us a panel of experts to discuss the report. Also shown on your screen is the QR code to download the report, the CCDR, but this will also be posted at the SEARCA website along with Anuja's presentation and today's recording. So let us help one another get through this COVID-19 pandemic as we face the new normal, our new beginnings and journeys with anticipation, optimism, enthusiasm, and care for each other. Once again, this is Jean Labiot. I am from SEARCA. Stay safe, keep well. Goodbye, everyone, and have a good rest of Wednesday.
Thank you.
The Philippines is one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change. Climate shocks hamper economic activities, damage infrastructure, and impact the livelihoods of Filipinos, hurting the poor and vulnerable most. Adaptation to climate change, therefore, is critical to sustain recovery and reduce poverty. The World Bank's Country Climate and Development Report for the Philippines finds that the country has many options to address the climate crisis, including fully implementing and scaling up existing climate actions. The Philippines can reduce its vulnerability and future losses to climate change by implementing better flood management, avoiding new construction in floodplains and coastal areas already known to be at risk of flooding and storm surges, ensuring that new buildings are energy efficient, encouraging efficient use of water in farming, promoting mass transit and non-motorized transport, including bicycles in cities, improving water storage, and climate-proofing critical infrastructure, assets, and services. The report also calls for more investments in renewable energy to lessen air pollution and enhance energy security, and recommends that the existing social protection system be strengthened and scaled up to provide support to affected people. This is not a path without challenge. The investments needed for climate action are substantial, but not out of reach. Many climate actions are win-win solutions, contributing to mitigating climate change while making the Philippines more resilient.